Here, do this. Good evening. The purpose of the school board work session this evening is to select the next superintendent of Osseo area schools. And with that, I'd like to do introductions around the table, starting to my right.
Jessica Craig, school board member.
Jackie Mosqueda Jones, school board member.
Heather Douglas, school board member.
Dean Henke, school board member.
Barb Olson, Director of School Community Relations.
Jim Bauk, interim superintendent.
Laurel Anderson, Executive Director of Human Resources.
And Mike Ostafi, board chair. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Bauk.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to walk through the materials in your packet real quick, and then we'll come back to them as appropriate. Obviously, the agenda's on the top with the outcomes, and we'll walk through that bullet by bullet tonight. The next sheet in there is the summary sheet that Barb sent to all of you. And on the back side, if you notice, it has the stakeholder input, and those are the next few documents in your packet. So when you're looking at Barb's comments, and it says 4 attached documents, that first document is the one that starts out with the area 30 characteristics report is the front page. It's got a cover on the back. It's got the 30 characteristics on a couple different sides of paper. That is the information collected for the profile from both the focus groups and the online survey. And then the next document in there is just it looks like this, Ray and Associates with the 4 columns. Those are the 4 additional questions that we had Ray and Associates run through with the focus groups, if I'm right. Is that right?
That we asked in the groups.
And they asked in the groups because we wanted some open-ended questions to be asked. So that's the tally of that data. And then what you have following that, that's that printed colored stuff, is actually page after page of the actual invitation that was put together that the search firm used last time. The sheet that will be of the most importance tonight is this one with the gray where it has the final draft of the profile. So with that said, welcome, Jim. I'm sure your drive was a hazardous one all the way. So
Delightful.
yep. So
It's less than an inch of snow, so
It's very slippery, though.
I don't get it.
Very slippery.
So with that said, and I'm glad you made it here safely, Jim, and we just started, so you're fine. I thought what we would do is just kind of work our way through each of the bulleted items this evening and see where we can reach agreement if at all possible. And then if we can't get agreement, then we'll kind of come back to it on December 4th. So with that said, let's start with the first item underneath the outcomes, which is to finalize the search process steps and timelines. That's in your packet. And I guess I'll just make a couple comments because I really took what I said last time and put it down on paper for you now to look at. And so let me just make a couple comments and then we'll just turn it all out to you to see what questions you have, comments, concerns that you have, if there are things that you want to change in it. Whatever it may be. So underneath general parameters, from me, I'm just speaking as I spoke 2 weeks ago. I still think we have great information from the collection of data last winter on the profile. And I'm still suggesting to you that just for the case of time and timeliness of doing the search, and by the way, Burnsville, Minnesota now has a vacancy, and their search will begin in January. So we're about 6 weeks in front of them right now. And I think I told our board members earlier in another meeting that we just have to be ready. There'll be more of those as time comes on. And so right now I'm still thinking we got to be timely in this process. The second thing that's under general parameters is I recommended 2 weeks ago that we hire School Exec Connect, which was your second firm last time. And I gave those reasons why last time with Minnesota connections, yet Upper Midwest, and some other rationales provided to you. And I can always revisit that if you'd like me to. And then if you go to the recommended steps, phase 1, the recruitment, I didn't make any edits or changes to what I shared with you verbally last time. We'd post the vacancy in December and have it closed in January. And the timeline we can really talk with the search firm about. We might be able to, I was looking today, can maybe even shorten that up a week and move a little quicker. And then, again, depending on what role you want me to play, I would work with the search firm to recruit. And I've already got a list going, and I've already talked to 3 or 4 people on the phone. The candidate screening process, which Last time, there was just some concern mentioned about it, and so I restructured it a little bit. First of all, after Tim Palmatier and I walked through it, I think the important thing is that it's not a board committee, which at times can be empowered to make decisions. And so I relabeled it and called it an advisory team. And they're really going to be advisory to the search firm. And so, and we also determined that a quorum, we don't have to worry about a quorum up to 3 members. So we can take a look at having up to 3 members of the board participate on that advisory team. I added Laurel to that, and myself, and then a couple members of the search firm. And so with that in mind, the advisory team would, search firm would bring applicants in for a short interview with the advisory team. The advisory team would make recommendations back to the search firm as to who to bring in. The search firm would still determine who they bring in, okay? And they might find that we go through that process and all of a sudden Laurel applies, with 1 day to go in the application process, and they think Laurel's a worthy candidate and we'd like to bring Laurel in, and the advisory team can't come together to even interview Laurel in a timely fashion. And then the search firm makes that decision, they bring that candidate in. And again, the real goal here is to bring candidates to the full board, because you will decide who's really going to go forward in the process. So again, step 3, or phase 3 then, would be the full board. You would interview, you'd review the materials on each of the candidates, and then you would go through a decision-making process with the search firm and determine out of those 4, 5, 6, whatever number of candidates that you're looking at over probably 2 nights. You'll have audience feedback, because we'll create a sheet for them, and they can do it online or in person. You can look at that information. And I suggested last time that, let's say you have 5 candidates and you do that interviewing over 2 nights, that you really come back the 3rd day, because then you can get the audience participation information in front of you and have some time to digest that, and maybe come back that next late afternoon, maybe it's a 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock start time, work through with the search firm, candidate A, B, C, D, go through a forced pairing similar to what you did, last time around. And then you're really trying to hone it down to maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 candidates that you really want to spend a full day with in another week or so. Then phase 4, I didn't make any changes there to what I verbally shared with you 2 weeks ago. Writing sample, tour of the district, interview with the cabinet. And let me just reiterate, question and answer sessions. So those would be, as noted in here, each question and answer session would be facilitated by the search firm. We'll allow participants to provide written feedback and allow participants in the audience, staff in one, teachers in one, sports staff in one, community in one, students in one, where they can just ask the questions. And the search firm would make sure that the questions are legal and not inappropriate or anything like that. And I've participated in those kind of sessions before. And the reason I'm proposing this to you is that think of a referendum campaign, which we will be running in 2020. I mean, they're going to be standing in front of your community, our school community, and having to answer questions on the fly. And so I just think it's a good process. Plus, we get input directly from the people who come, or if they view it online, if we do all that interviewing in this room, that to be determined, because you have to think through logistics, too, of how to pull all that off. Then I suggested, again, the presentation of the school board with the board doing an interview. I didn't put the dinner piece on there, which you did last time. I can take those people to dinner that night and give them a little decompression time and a little bit of relaxation time. And then after you do those final interviews for whatever number, 2, 3 candidates, whatever it is, again, come back the next evening to then process through so that you can get all the feedback from that full day from both. Let's say there's 3 candidates, so you get all 3 of them, and then you can come back as a group. And again, the search firm would run you through a process. Now, if we use School Exec Connect, they will have all of you in the same room. They will not divide you out into different rooms, so you will hear the conversation from Mike to Jessica, Jessica to Tanya to whoever, all the board members will hear all the conversation in the same room. And I think last time they divided you out. And that's a strategy too. There's nothing wrong with that. I just believe school exec will do what you want done. But I would recommend you all sit in the same room. And, you know, the candidates, by then, their names are out in front of everybody, and you know who you're talking about. So anyway, we can work through those details later. And then it's really moving on to, having you go through that process, selecting that candidate, and then authorizing the board to go ahead and contact that candidate and begin contract negotiations. And then I suggested last time, I'd probably set a special meeting. And once that contract has been negotiated, we find a date where everyone can be here, and the candidate hopefully could be here, and we sign him or her to that contract and have you approve it, and we get that done as soon as possible and not have it drag into, we don't have another meeting, official meeting in March until March 23rd or whatever. No, let's not wait. Let's call a special meeting. Let's get it done and get that person ready to go. And then we'll work on a transition plan with them in their current district. And as I suggested to you last time, I'm really hopeful that whoever you hire as a school board, we're able to get in here for some transition days, a few in March, a few in April, a few in May, and a few in June, and get the ball rolling, so to speak. At the end of the document are the roles. I didn't change the roles any. I guess the three of us felt that those are the things that you would want us to do. I can add one thing. Laurel and I will go through the contract. I know we're going to talk about contract tonight, hopefully a little bit, but we can go through that piece too and look at MSBA's sample contract, look at MASA's sample contract, and bring back some recommendations to you with language there. And obviously, we work with you would work with Knutson Flynn on the exact language. I would say to you that as a board, as we get into the process, you really want to have that contract nailed down so that you're really empowered, whoever your board chair is. Usually 2 people will negotiate that initial contract, the board chair and the vice chair, so that they know they can go into that conversation with that individual and know what the parameters are, and it's pretty well laid out. And I know the candidates will be asking the consulting firm, well, what is the current contract? What are they currently paying? So I think if we can give them, some parameters to use too as they contact people and me, that'd be helpful. So,
Jim, can I share some comment on that?
Yep.
So I remember back through the years with MSBA, and then as we would do new superintendents, if I remember right, MSBA had said it'd be nice if we kind of had our contract already ready to go, so that maybe it's just salary and maybe there's another benefit in there versus there's no written contract and you're negotiating absolutely everything.
I'm 100% online with you, Dean, and that's what I meant. I didn't say it very clearly, but I would want it spelled out
I probably
right down
had
to the
old
last T.
things running through my head.
Yeah. You're better off then.
Yeah.
If you send the board chair and the vice chair in there with nothing written, then you spend time, kind of working your way
Yeah.
through that. And let's say if it's an out-of-state candidate, I can work with that person too regarding parameters around Minnesota contracts. And they have an obligation too to contact MASA, their professional organization in Minnesota, to say, give me a sample contract for Minnesota so I know kind of what's out there. But 100% I agree with you. It should be ready to go. And I think Laurel and I talked about the other day, and we'll talk about compensation later tonight, is we may want to have, some wiggle room here and there. You got a $7,500 match right now in the 403B. Well, what if they want a little more money there, but a little less money over here? As long as we keep the total cost of the contract within where you want it to be. I can tell you the person who replaced me moved some money off of salary, moved it into a different kind of benefit that was appropriate given the age of his family and everything versus the old senior, mature, tenured superintendent person. I just cannot remember that word, because I haven't had tenure, Dean, for 20-some years, so I don't know what that's about anymore. And I think if we keep that flexibility in mind, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
We'll be fine. So, questions about the process? Comments, thoughts, things we should rewrite, things we should change?
I'm
Where
thrilled
are you
with
at?
the restructuring of the advisory team. I think that's great, and I'm fully on board. So thank you for that work.
Okay, great.
I shared some feedback with Jim recently. So currently myself, I'm going through a job search, and so when I was thinking about this process here, I thought, man, it'd really be nice if we had 2 columns of data. On the left is, here's our requirements and or preferred qualifications, and then in the right, in the text box, they're putting in their response. So if we say multiple high schools within multiple communities, that would be a piece of criteria. They write, yep, 2 high schools in 4 communities. Just so that if we've got 6 people that we're looking at, we can lay them all out. I would take all of that and put it into an Excel
spreadsheet.
document. You know, so I've got, my column A is here's our criteria, and there's candidate A, B, C, D, E, so that you can just kind of go, yep, okay, yep. You can highlight with color and all that cool stuff, but it's just a Laurel.
I have to say, it was fairly easy to figure out the people that came from districts of comparable size. It wasn't too
Yeah,
difficult to.
but I mean, then it gets into all the other things. So, you know, for me, I resonate with data and very specific where I can line things up. If there was a 1-page response to one of our pieces of criteria, wow, how do you quantify that when you're looking at a bunch of multiple candidates? So just one way of looking at how we might lay out our criteria and their response, question by question.
Yeah, and that's a tactic we can review within,
Tactic, yep.
you know, the team or run that by the search firm. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, anything to make it easier to understand what, you know, what we're looking for and how things match up. So, and not, you know, we're looking for a lot of things. People have a lot of experience. You know, there'll be plenty of overlap, and there'll be some things that don't. But, you know, we're not going to find, you know, someone that matches 35 different requirements.
Well, that's true. What I shared with Dean is that might be something that you do with that first round of interviewing.
Mhm.
So when the search firm comes in with those 5 candidates or whatever number it is for those 2 nights of interviewing, they have those candidates respond to that kind of a T chart that you were
Yep.
describing, Dean. And then we have time to work through that with the search firm. And, you know, it might be things, I suggested to Dean, maybe it's some key outcomes that they can express around referendum campaigns they've run. Because within a year, our new superintendent's going to have to run a referendum campaign. So it might not be just, you know, had they been in multiple high schools or something that's pretty straightforward data. It might be, you know, and I know in some states they can't run referendums. They can run bond referendums, but they can't run levy, for example, referendums, because there's a state statute that doesn't allow that to happen. But maybe there's some key pieces that we see either in that profile or in addition to that profile. They say, yeah, we just want a little more information. And I shared with Dean, I said, we can get the search firm to say, that application, I think that's what you were referring to a little bit, they're identical. So you'll get that, you know, and the resumes will come at us or into the search firm looking,
Everything's going to look different.
everything's going to look different.
Cover letters look different.
Yeah, but we can take that application, which the search firm will use a lot to decide who they're going to bring in. And then we can use this kind of document to quantify some things that we want to see in that first round interviewing. And now you've got those 2 documents in front of you. Now you're going to interview. Now you've got your audience participation. You can take all those pieces together and say, in the next day, okay, do we have the right, you know, people we want to spend time with these 2 or these 3 and really spend a full day with them. So I think you're right. I think we can work through that. And if that's something that you want to do, because obviously Dean's not going to be here to make that decision, so.
I'm
Just
just trying
pointing that
to
out,
influence
Dean.
it on the front end.
And no, I fully support the phases that are laid out here and the steps and the timing and the need to get it done with urgency, so.
Okay. Jim, anyone else comments?
Yeah, I was wondering, kind of evolving a little bit of what Dean was saying about allowing you to compare. First of all, do we know how many people applied last time? Was it several
28, I
hundred? Was it
think. I
20?
remember
Yeah.
28 in a file.
Okay, I was wondering how much we would want to automate some things if you were talking about lining them all up, you know, having some sort of a criteria. I mean, if you've got a list of questions, certainly they don't have the same importance. Maybe question 5 is really important to us, so that might have a weighting factor of, you know, 0.7 or something compared to another one. And so if you'd said, okay, this is really important, we want to make sure they've demonstrated equitable results with different demographic groups. Maybe we weight that high. Maybe another one that they've had, 4 communities, maybe that's not quite as important, and then,
Yep.
then you can say, oh, maybe some just rise to the top, and it might make it easier, or maybe that's something the search firm already does.
Oh, I think,
don't know.
I think when you ask your questions, you can decide you can determine the weighting that you want to put on a question. Let's say in that first round interview and you have 15 questions you're going to ask the candidates. You might say, questions 1, 7, 10, and 12 have a weighted value of 1.5 and however you score that. And so that you as a school board say, those are the 5 critical ones. All of them are important, but these we just have a little more emphasis on. You might even do that if we in fact do Dean's idea of that little T-sheet where you put,
Oh, I borrowed it from somebody else, so.
I know. I'm calling it yours now.
Borrow with
You know,
pride.
I picked on you all week in 2 other meetings, and I'm trying to be nice and
Thank
give you
you,
credit
thank
now.
you.
So,
I accepted.
thank you. Take a compliment when you can take one, Dean. So, I mean, we could weight some of those things too, if that was a preference, if we use that design to quantify some data, and then you can do that too. So those are all good things that we can bring to the table with the search firm and have them work through and make sure that we do it, make sure they do it the way we want it done.
And I also raised it even just from the applicant's perspective, going through, I'm a numbers person. If I was in that role applying, writing paragraphs and paragraphs of responses gets to be, for me, it would be a lot. So to get those, whatever they are, 5, 10, really high-level specific things that we want, and then get really good responses for those. I know there's a whole bunch of other data, but just trying to collect it in a good, reasonable fashion that's going to work for them and work for us, because we're the ones that have to review it. You guys have to review it.
So I imagine that the search committee has a good handle on qualitative data. So what you're talking about is taking qualitative data and making it into quantitative data. This is my professor coming out in me for a moment here. So, yeah, so I imagine that the search team would be able to sift through the paragraphs, pull out the pieces that you're looking for as a numbers data person. I have the good fortune of coming from data family, but I'm more of a paragraph person myself. So I'm sure we can figure out, I'm sure they can figure it out.
And I say that because that's been my lived experience, is who's doing the sorting and the sifting, whereas if here's the question, here's the box, you drop it in, nobody has to go look for where's Dean's response to that
Right.
particular area of interest. It's right there.
This reminds me of standards-based grading. You've got a rubric to say, okay, based upon this response,
yes,
this person
thank you.
gets a 3.
Yep,
Put it
This
in,
person doesn't,
yep.
yeah.
Again, I don't want to douse the conversation, but I think we can work through some of that.
Yeah.
As we get closer, we'll work with the search firm and maybe even the questions that if you do that T-square idea, that maybe they're not the profile, maybe they are some specific key outcomes you're looking for that they've, had some experience with, whether it's referendums or whatever. I back Jim, Jackie, Heather, and Dean on the process that's been outlined, and then I'll turn out, we have Tanya here tonight, but not the other. You're okay?
Yeah, I think it
Yep.
looks,
Jackie?
I'm great with the process. I just want to say up front that I'm hoping that this time around, I know it's for the information gathering, that we didn't have a lot of people at the 3 forums to come for the profile. That we can make sure we have community outreach in order to get people to the
Open
question and
answer question,
things,
yeah.
We did have, 1,200 online responses?
A little over
1199.
Yeah.
Okay. 1,200.
1,200.
Being a word person
Yeah.
and being a
And they may
numbers
not be right.
person,
Yeah. Yeah, I
believe
might
it.
not have that exactly right, but it was pretty darn close.
Yes. It was like 1,167.
But you know, we'll do all the outreach, and we've talked about that already. And those Q&A sessions are a good opportunity for people. And if we do them in this room and they're video, they can be online, and people can watch online too, so that they wouldn't have to be physically present.
Is there
And
a
then
way to
still-
do it, is there a way to do it more in Brooklyn Center or Brooklyn Park?
You know, from looking at what we did the last time and the amount of effort that was spent and the outcomes that were very poor, I don't see anything that would get us a better outcome. The online did very well. I mean, 1,200 responses did very well. But to get people to come out in the middle of winter, even though we had different translators, we had childcare, we had food, you know, we had all of these things, and yet you couldn't get, you know, people did not come out. They had other priorities, but they were able to go online and fill it out, and we had hundreds of input from online after the interview process. So there was a ton of input. We just didn't receive it in those forums.
No, yeah, and I saw the data here. But I'm talking about the question and answer forum, which is different
Can I
than
jump in on that, Chad?
than gathering.
Okay, oh, yeah.
So
So your,
maybe,
no, just, would you ask your question again, please?
Yeah.
Your question was?
I just want to make sure that we can get people to a physical building, because if
Okay.
part of our process is the question and answer for the superintendent to field questions from the community, I want there to make sure that we are getting as much of a cross-section of our community as we possibly can.
Sure.
Because the superintendent is going to be doing that. And I understand you can outreach, I've worked for school districts for a long time. You outreach and outreach and outreach and people don't come, but I
That's
know
right.
that there are things that probably have not been tried that we could try to do that. At least make best efforts.
And we did do, so we've done that before. There's one difference in the way we did it before. For a previous superintendent, we did have meetings at Maple Grove City Hall, Brooklyn Park City Hall, and here. Now, the difference this time is if we do want to expand access through broadcasting it live and having it
Right.
stream on the web, that makes it more complicated.
That's what I was
But we
worried
can
about.
look into it.
can I jump in on that? So when I've had webinars, could they email in the question? So they may have a sick child at home, can't physically get there,
Yep.
but they could email in,
Yeah, they can.
Or set up a chat
great.
room.
okay.
I think it's
Barb and I
really
talked the other-
important,
oh,
sorry, I just wanted to underscore that timing is really important. So I just wanted to adhere to a strict schedule.
Yeah, when you get into these community sessions, the staff session for, you know, administrators, when I've been involved in them, they've been usually set up for about 40 minutes of Q&A time, and they leave a little cushion because they always run over, and you got to get them, you got to get people out of there and the next group in. And you got to give that candidate a little time away from the microphone so they can have a drink of water and whatever. And so it's going to be a tight day. I'm just telling you right now, that day is going to be very tight. We can do some of those pieces like the writing sample, tour, interview at the cabinet, actually the interview with the kids or the Q&A with the kids. We can structure all of that right up front and boom, 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 boom as we go along. When we get in those Q&A sessions, we've got to make sure that they end on time and they're ready to go to the next one. And when I did it, the last time I was involved in that, they did them all in the same room. And they made sure that they were done in 40 minutes. And the search firm cut it off. And then if I wanted to, I could stand and, you know, meet and greet people if I wanted to, which is what I did. Other candidates may have just walked out and used the restroom or whatever and then came back in. And then they clear the room and then they let the teachers come in, you know, and the administrators are gone. And then they clear the room a little, you know, with a little more dead time so that the community can come in. And I was thinking in my head, at least, when we do the community, you do that and we might just roll right into the presentation and into the board interview. And kind of combine that. So We can do questions by email. Barb and I were talking about some events I've been involved with, electric town hall meetings, and we had people send in via email, and we were broadcasting live. So that can be done. We can work on that. But at some point, the search firm's going to cut it off and say that we don't have any more time for questions. And it's just the way it's going to be. So we'll probably hurt some people if we have large participation in those events, because not everyone's question is going to get answered. But it's still a good process. It's a good, healthy process, and I would still suggest that one or two board members be at each one of those Q&A sessions, because you can watch the candidates as they, this is a bad statement, but as they work with the crowd, with the community, with the teachers, with the administrators. How does that interaction feel? Because there's an intuitive side to hiring somebody too. And I told, Dean and I had a meeting today, and I'm a data guy, so, you don't have to go very far down that road and I'll run with you. But there's also an intuitive side of making this decision, and so you'll get that feel as we go through that day with those people. So, Jim.
I was wondering, can we invite our school board elect to the table? I mean, since he's here, we have other people at the table that are not school board members, so.
Who would that be?
And counting 3 right over there. So I don't see why not. Would you like to take my seat?
Well, you're
Somebody
just
will
come
be
here, I'll
any-
just move the
anyway,
mic
but-
over.
Yeah.
That's fine.
You're welcome to come up.
Tanya, or you can share here if you
Please
want.
join us.
If you want to slide that over, I can just put this between us.
So Jackie, we will work on that. Okay? And I don't know if it means, offering a bus that would be available to get people over to this facility, if this is where we hold those interviews, or what we do, but we can think of a few strategies.
Yeah.
And I think to keep in mind 2 things. Accessibility through technology is, easy technology is going to ground you here.
Right.
Because of the system we use. And the primary purpose for those Q&A sessions is to give you information that you will use to inform your decision.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments about the process? Anya, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I agree with the process. It sounds like the right balance between efficiency and leveraging what's been done in the past, and some new components as well.
Okay, good. Let's tuck the process away and move on to bullet number 2, which is the search firm. I made a recommendation to you last time that we work with school exec. Comments, questions? Yes, no, don't do that. Let's go through an RFP process. What would you like to do?
It was specifically School Exec Connect and the main principal, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think last time I told you, if we use School Exec Connect, it will be Ken Dragseth. Will ensure that happens. And he is the main owner now. And he was the superintendent in Edina, principal there, assistant sup. He's been a professor at the University of Minnesota. He ran the licensure program here at the U of M for superintendents and principals for about 10 years. And the firm, last time I told you, the firm's roots are in Illinois, Metro Illinois. And Linda Hansen was the original owner, and Linda Hansen is also a Minnesotan, but a transplant to the Chicago area. So you will get some upper Midwest candidates in their search, I'm sure. You'll get a few candidates from the coast maybe too, but they're not a national firm. They don't have offices out in LA and New York and all that kind of stuff, so.
I'm
Laurel?
fine with that.
Yeah, I would be fine with that.
Yeah. Were we able to find any information on the previous contract?
Yes.
Maybe, okay, can't disclose that here, maybe?
Tim believes that they have upheld their contract.
Okay.
And we need to pay it.
Okay. I would be on board with the new firm.
Okay. I heard a yes, yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. What about the roles of the 3 of us? It's at the bottom of that page. Comments there, questions about what the 3 of us would be working on and where we'd be spending our time? And obviously, have some fluidity to it as we move down the road here too, but,
I don't have any concerns about that at all. I feel like
Okay.
that's exactly what we need.
all right. We're okay?
That's
Good?
We're good.
Okay, then let's go to the superintendent profile components, which is all the other information you received in that packet. The final draft is this one that has that gray box. That was the final thing that went out in the application materials. I don't know where you want to start or where you want to finish here. I'll give you, since Dean paid me a nickel yesterday, I'll give you my nickel's worth. It's an inside joke with Dean and I. I made a comment to him, I said, do you want my nickel's worth? And so he came in last night before our board meeting, gave me a nickel and said, yes, I want your nickel's worth. Anyway, we got to have a little humor here. I know this is gonna be a big decision and everything, but we've got to have some fun.
For us analytical folks, that's huge humor.
That's huge. We don't laugh much.
Wait a minute.
Well-
I put myself in the analytical field, and that is sad. Sad.
You're smiling. Oh, I didn't think it was, I mean, it may be,
It's a short timer, just humor.
It's just
a
humor.
mentor of mine always said that it's a wicked sense of humor, so however you want to interpret that.
You from New England?
Pardon?
We could smile.
Okay, back to seriousness. My comment would be, I think if there are some things you'd like to tweak, we should do that real quickly. Again, I still believe that the input received from a year ago holds water yet today. And it's a general profile. You're going to get your specific questions asked of candidates as you move down and through this process. But it gives any candidate a general idea of where are some touch points that they need to be aware of and how does their career fit with those touch points in our district. And so my comment to you this evening is I would leave it as is. But it's really your choice and we need to work through it. Don't have to have a final answer tonight. But I know, and because I'll invite Ken Dragseth to join us next Tuesday night, they're going to want this thing, they're going to want to sit down with Barb and Laurel and I and get this thing ready to roll pronto. And so we need to know what you want to do with this. So with that, I don't know, Laurel or Barb, do you have any comments? Barb, you were involved with it last time, I don't know.
I think I would recommend maintaining the same work that you did last year.
And I think most of these came from the top bullet points of what came to the top out of all the feedback and all the sessions, both the quantitative, the rankings, as well as the qualitative, the answering those questions, so.
They absolutely did, and
Yep.
then you adjusted a little bit.
Yeah.
to Make it what
It-
you wanted.
Yeah, and would this, be substantially or materially different from any other profile going out for any other candidate within the state of Minnesota at this point in time, or at least in the metro? And the answer is probably no. So I think, as you said, there'll be some other things that we'll each personally, decide are higher ranked or not, and that comes down into the personal decision that we all need to make and make as a board. But yeah, there's nothing that is glaringly out, is missing or shouldn't be there, at least in my opinion.
Okay, good, thanks, Mike.
Can I
Others?
chime in on this? And so I sat in the audience when some of this was going on, so, yeah, so thanks for clarifying. So these bullets here became this here.
Yeah.
So from my earlier comment, like if we did the T thing, are there 5 to 7 things on here that like rise to the top? So if I was a superintendent applying for this, and as a board member, I would make some assumptions that they're all going to be strongly committed to putting students first. So within that job, there are some givens that if they've been a superintendent, it's going to be a given that they're going to delegate to staff. And so if we ask for, here are our top 7 things, and here's how we want you to respond to them, this is what I'm thinking would be like in that T box if we went that route.
Well, if I recall correctly, we did list it in order of
Pretty
importance.
much in order of importance as it came out both
Okay,
to us
okay.
and to the input that we received.
Okay.
So it pretty much.
So you've got it in order.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so then, just to give an example, so if I got like 3/4 of the way down and it says strongly committed to putting students first in all decisions, I would say, yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know what more we would be looking for in like written information if we were getting that feedback.
You're right, some of these bottom bullets are probably, table stakes. I have to make short and long-term goals. I mean, if you can't do that, you haven't risen to the point where you're even
Correct.
applying for this, and you haven't got that far in your career. But I think it helps, to then lead into the question, well, show me. Give me examples of what you've done to
I was
do
just gonna
this
say,
and
Dan,
balance them off.
I can think of a superintendent that took over a district, came from a smaller district, and really struggled delegating. And in this size district, you are going to either
yeah.
delegate or die as superintendent. It's as simple as that.
Or you're going to be working 23.5 hours a day.
Which means you're gonna die in about a month.
Yeah, I mean, so even though it's kind of self-evident, I would, having seen that happen and then having, I'll use the cabinet kind of,
Yeah.
just kind of struggle underneath that kind of leadership, it's okay to say it. Because you can always come back as a board when you're done hiring and evaluating and saying, this is the problem, okay? You said this, but your behavior is this. And so,
It just puts it out-
I'm just using that as an example.
No, and I appreciate it, and where my mind is going is just to try to get a sufficient level of information so that if we're looking at 6 candidates, how can we compare those answers, responses, so that, as board members, I just think of going through all of, how many questions you got? 12, 15? Times X number of candidates that you bring in, so.
And these may not be the questions that are asked, these may
No.
be things you pull from the interview or pull from the
Multiple screening.
yeah, the screening, but then there'll be other questions that may be the ones that rise to the top for each person.
See,
Do
what
you
I
think
would
it's
do is,
important to have these bullet points on here, though, because these are things that were brought to our attention by our
Yep.
community?
by the
absolutely.
community and
Yeah.
staff. See, I would use this as, kind of where you're going a little bit, this is going to be my filter. So as I hear answers to the questions that we're asking, and I watch them do a presentation and everything, if I ran that person through this lens, how do they filter through that? And so, that's how I'm going to be using it. And we might use it in that kind of model that you were talking about earlier in getting more quantifiable data. And I didn't know they were prioritized, so that's kind of nice.
Yep.
Well, that's good. Other thoughts about the profile? I mean, I know Ken Drexel's going to look at it, he's going to want to chew on it. I mean, even though we say this is what we want, they'll probably have a few suggestions for us, maybe not. But I just need to know, we want to be comfortable so when we walk in next week with, meeting with him, that this is what we're looking for, do you see a problem with this? And, and then he can respond from there.
I have a quick question. Would putting something like, has a good grasp on educational statutes, is that too limiting, or, would that affect people coming from out of state? Would that be, okay,
And we have staff who can help.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That, it's a great question. I was kind of along the same lines. With something this large, they're going to have to delegate. They're going to have to know who to tap into. I would not expect that they would be in depth in, to the minutia of HR law.
Unless you want
Kind of fun, huh?
to delegate your responsibility.
Oh, now, so that's fun, Laurel. So that's fun.
I overrule that
We just need
suggestion.
to know what's fun and what's not.
No, and I think, yeah.
Now we're in your sandbox.
No, you're right. I think, we have the staff that's available and capable
Yeah.
to get into those details that you can't know everything. You have to
But
lead
that
the
could
right team to
potentially
figure
be,
things out.
a response, right? I mean, if I was coming into this, I would want to know what's my depth on the bench? Who, do we have all those things covered?
yeah, and Kate was just very,
Or am I going
Kate
to
was
have to
very
do it
good
all,
with
right?
that aspect. So I was just wondering.
And I think what, the candidates that come into interview are going to, hi Kelsey, You can come and join us at the table. They're going to be calling me, and they'll if they have other people in the district they know, they're going to call those people and say, you know, what's the cabinet like? You know, what's it like to work with Laurel or Barb or whatever? And so, if they're doing their homework, they're gonna get that information through various sources. So, and not necessarily directly from the three of us or whoever they're, you know, concerned about. So. Anything else with the profile right now? Otherwise, we'll check it off for tonight, and we'll have it in a different format for tomorrow or for next Tuesday. Okay?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Yep.
All right.
I was just,
Salary and compensation.
Jim, can I go back just a little bit?
No, you cannot, Dean.
So I'm thinking the multiple high schools is not on here.
Mhm.
So if this is kind of our high level, this is the job posting going out there, I'm thinking that should be on here. If that's going to be a piece of criteria.
That didn't come up from the feedback from any of the groups, and I think we could be limiting. You know, there's not more than a handful of districts currently in this state that have multiple high schools.
Yep.
And if you're going to do that, then you're automatically shrinking your pool, and then you're also, you know, forcing it maybe to outstate into large cities, and that may not necessarily, you know, we would be, I think, inappropriately limiting ourselves by putting that together. That is a good question to ask, and
Yeah.
if they're smart and they're coming into the district, they know who we are, what we have, and they better be prepared to be able to answer the questions and how they would manage that situation, so.
And that's where I'm saying it's different if you're, so you could also throw in size. So you're coming from an out-of-metro, single high school, single community, 3,000 students, and you're coming into 8 communities, 3 high schools. It's a very different dynamic.
Jim, how many high schools did you have at your previous district?
2.
Okay. I think we would be limiting ourselves, like Mike said.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Okay.
Right,
That's
that
just
needs to be a consideration.
that's Dean's truth, is multiple high schools, because my truth is it's easy to support a high school in a community. You now have 3 high schools with very different communities that you have to find a way to support those communities across 3 schools. To me, that's a very different look than one school, one community.
You could.
I'll
very
hop off
easily-
my soapbox.
That's okay. And you can very easily ask a question around that, you know, and not that they have to have that experience.
Yeah.
Back to Jessica, but how would you? You know, a lot of times when we've done interviews, you know, the question will be, how have you done this, or how would you do this? So you ask both, so that if they've had that experience of a multiple high school district, they'll respond in that fashion. If they haven't, they'd say, well, I'm from Eden Prairie. Now, Josh Swanson's probably not going to apply because he's just been hired superintendent there 18 months ago.
Pick Bemidji.
But that'd be Bemidji. But
Lately,
anyway,
yeah.
you know, they're going to respond and say, this is how I would do it then, you know. So I think that's an area you can tap into too, pretty easily.
And if they can't answer the question, they haven't thought it through, and they don't really know our
Then they don't know our
system.
district.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
If you haven't done your homework, then, you know,
And
you're applying to the lead role of a $300 million organization, shame on you.
Right. I was gonna say, if I was applying for the job and my only experience was in a district of 3,000 kids, I would be applying way outside my range. You know what I mean? I think our firm is going to see that and be like,
Yeah.
not sure.
Oh,
You
yeah.
figure out how to translate your experiences into
Right.
direct correlation into the things that are there, and if you feel that you're strong enough to have it, then you're gonna apply. If not, then you're not
Right.
gonna apply into this
Hopefully.
type of role. Yeah.
You're exactly right. I can give you an example. I can think back to, is a gentleman who's a superintendent today. We hired him out of a small Catholic parochial school of about 150 students, and he was going to come and run a 800-student elementary school. And staff were really concerned at the sizing. But if you listen to his answers to the questions, he knew what he was talking about. He knew how he would work with a larger, you know, body of students, staff, and school community. And And it happened to work out well. He did a very good job, and obviously his career went in different pathways after that and became a superintendent. But, so I think as you're listening, if that's a question you pose to candidates, it's like a first-year teacher. If we were going to wait for all the experiences, and I know that's not where you were going, you'd never hire a first-year teacher, too. So I think we can get at that topic in a good way that can ferret it out for you.
I think, yeah, in our previous process, we had candidates come forward that had both experiences. So it was something we were considering as a board during the process. It just wasn't a part of this
Yes.
presentation or, application.
You might come down and say that their leadership qualities and characteristics we're looking for are equal. Now you're going to go to that experience base and say, who may hold an upper hand there? That's another way to look at candidates too. I always look at them, I want to see the leadership piece first, and who do I think has the capacity and wherewithal to do that? And if I feel comfortable with Barb and Laurel, now it might come down to, well, Laurel came out of a multiple high school district, she's had some experiences, she's helped run a referendum, or, blah, 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 and it might start swaying me this way. But I'll wait on those experiences and technical skills until after I've weighed the first piece. So. Okay.
Salary.
We'll put that down, we'll go to compensation. You have a chart in your folder, and I don't know, Laurel, you want to talk about assembling this and the benchmark districts, and then we'll open it up and take a look at comments that you have.
We use the board benchmark districts that we've used in the past, and Veronica Cardenas, my secretary, reached out to each school district and received their contract and went through it and updated not only the base salary, but some of the other fringe benefits that might necessarily, they might inflate the salary, but it might not show as the base. So for example, there's performance pay. 15-20% in some of these. So you might see a salary for Anoka Hennepin at $201,000, and yet performance pay, they can get 15%, $30,000. So it's not enough to compare base salary. You have to take in the other components. There is one update for RAVE, which is Apple Valley, Rosemount, Egan. So the interim superintendent was now named as superintendent, and they received a salary increase retroactive to July 1 of 2018. So that salary as of today is actually $218,900. So $218,900. As Jim was talking about, we looked at some of the comparables with the benefits, and I think that it's really important to, if we want to attract the right candidate and make this an attractive offer, we need to be clear on where are our parameters and what are our guidelines for maximum fringe benefits, with the flexibility to say, yeah, you can shift money here, or if you want a car allowance versus mileage, or however it meets the needs of you, as long as the costs stay neutral. And the other thing that we thought about, that it's a little hard to compare, but there's some buyback of sick leave or vacation days, which is also dollars. And so not knowing their number of sick days, but it tells you how many days you can buy back at their daily rate typically. So that's just another piece of information to consider as you're considering salaries. When Jim and I discussed looking at this as a large group market study, we believe that the base salary needs to be at least $225,000.
And was there any feedback from the process last time regarding the competitiveness of what was laid out with the 210 kind of on the page? Was there feedback from potential candidates that it wasn't competitive?
Probably never got that.
I don't know.
That would
Yeah,
have been
might
the
not have
search
That would have
firm.
been the search firm.
Okay.
And as the board talked about earlier, I mean, we really didn't get much information from the search firm in their whole recruitment process as to what might be stumbling blocks, so.
Okay.
And that, I remember I think it was plus or minus 10, or 7.5.
We
plus or
did
minus
give
10.
10
It was 10.
parameters.
So 200 to 220 in that range. But again, that was a year ago, and we are looking at next year now.
Yeah,
So that is
we're
something
2 years
that
away.
continues to
Yeah,
expand. And I'm sure most of these will have increases in it.
Yes,
of
they will.
3 to
They listed just
5%.
18, 19 salaries in there,
Yeah.
so.
So for next year, I mean, you pop all those up 5%, I mean, that's 10 grand on all of these. So, roughly. So, yeah, having that target around 225, and then again, you can play with some of the other things for the entire package. But that number puts a, line in the sand that says we're out there and we're being serious.
Yes.
We want great candidates.
So are you talking about then parameters on the 225?
No, parameters on the paid leave and a buyback and how much
So
we
putting
would put in.
parameters on that aspect, not.
So if right now we have a matching of 7,500 and we pay full family dental, but the employee only wants single family health and dental, then could we say, yes, we'll put additional money into a health savings account
Yeah.
or an
Okay.
HRA or something like that?
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think your benefit package is out of line an awful lot. I mean, there are some suburban superintendents or districts aren't listed here that probably have some better benefit packages. And they might have some better exiting packages at the end, for people. But Laura and I talked about there, I think what you have out there is not all, I mean, it's not off base.
Comparable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think, and here's my comment, and it may not be a very healthy one for whoever you want to hire. But they also have to come here and prove themselves to you as a board. Then you as a board have to be willing to say after 3 years, that let's say the person does a really good job, are you willing to step to the plate, reanalyze the market at that time and say, where do we stand? Okay? I can tell you that in Wayzata, the person who's there is Chase Anderson, and he didn't start out at the the top end of the world either, all right? And none of us do in these jobs, none of you have in your jobs. So there is a little onus on that person to come in too and meet your expectations on performance, but then you have to have the backbone to turn around and say, are we going to be competitive? Because, Burnsville opened, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, these openings won't bother you, but there's 5, 6 openings already in greater Minnesota. And, the little town of Staples is offering $145,000 or $150,000. And, I mean, this is bad, but I mean, they don't have 21,000 kids and 3,000 staff, even if Sourcewell is out of Staples. Great community, by the way. And Dr. Lund, who was there, was a great superintendent for a number of years. He died here recently. So anyway, you just want to be competitive, and I think we just need some flexibility within that benefit package to maybe move some things around. I'm not sure if 225 will be the right, I think it's a good starting point. I don't think you have to go to 250 either. That's just my personal opinion, okay? But I think if you put 225 out there, then you've at least set a marker out there. And if you feel you have to put something on the top side, you don't want to go 10,000 above that period, no matter what, the other strategy, that would be fine, okay? The other strategy, and this is what I've done. I've gone into districts and said, we'll negotiate that first salary and we'll leave it flat for 3 years. But then starting second year, then put in that performance clause of 5 or 10%. And then the third year, that 5 or 10%, not to build on, but each year it's that incentive pay. Then when we get into the third year, if I have, if I merit another contract and you want to keep me around, and now I'm going to go to the table and say, now we got to look at that base salary and see where it needs to be. So my suggestion would be that you start out at 225, you don't put an incentive pay in there the first year, you wait to year 2 and you add a 5 or 10% or 7.5% that's earnable. And as your contract currently said right now for Kate, you had a paragraph in there that outlined how performance pay could be, had to be mutually agreed upon goals. In fact, your signature is on that contract, Dean. And, it was spelled out. And so, and the thing you have to remember about performance pay is this, is there'll be, I had performance pay in my contract starting in 1996, so I was kind of an outlier, all right? And then it became much more in practice with superintendents over the years. I can also tell you that see, 3, 5, see, 1, 2, maybe 3, 3. There'd be 8 years out of 24 that I ever took performance pay and I was offered performance pay because the political climate wasn't right. You know, you get to the end of 2023, and if you have to put all those budget tactics in place and you're cutting staff and you're holding the line on contracts, you know, the smart superintendent's not going to say, oh, you know, I'll take that 10% performance pay. Thank you very much. So you have to be ready to deal with that side of the equation. It's a great positive incentive, don't get me wrong. But you also have to understand that the political climate might be such where that person, in your mind, is justified in receiving it, but may in fact turn it down and not accept it.
We did encounter that as a board, you know,
Yes.
over multiple superintendents, different years, different contracts. And so to your point, you can potentially get behind the market, you know, when we're as large as we are. I'm just looking, we've got, I don't know how big South Washington is, you know, Elk River,
16,000.
Robbinsdale. Some of the smaller schools are paying as much as Osseo, so you can fall behind some of your neighboring smaller districts.
I think that's why Laurel and I felt comfortable at 225, and then you add that incentive piece in there. And I'm suggesting the second year, it gives you as a board a chance to get acclimated with that new person and then establish how you want that incentive pay to work and their performance plan and the goals that they set, versus coming right out of the chute and sitting down with that person in June or July, and they don't even have a grasp of what's going on in the district right now. And so it'd be easier to do that the second year. But the 225, I think, can make it attractive enough. It puts us in that game with neighboring districts and the same size districts, so.
That makes sense, considering how important this position is. You don't necessarily want to nickel and dime it, you know. This is really important.
And we forget. I'm on my soapbox a little bit too much tonight, and I'm advocating for someone that you know, I'm not going to be here and working with you folks, but and when you add in everything, every dollar we spend, it's not just the $280 million that we spend in operating. You know, we're spending over $300 million. We're a $300 million business with 3,000 employees and 21,000, you know, students, but 150,000 customers out there. I told the leadership team here, if you take the average high school kid, and I know I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I'm trying to talk about the importance of this position. The average high school kid, if they're in an activity, how many customer touches does the district have with that kid in a day? If you add them up, it's like it could be 15. I don't know if Target can survive 175 days of 15 touches a day with the same customer, okay? And so I say that honestly, it helps understand how big our business is. Because that child goes to 7 classes or 6 classes. Let's say they have an afternoon activity, they're on the bus, they interact with food service, their locker doesn't work, they're interacting with the custodian, they're in the office because mom bring on the horn because they forgot to bring it for band. And you think about that whole thing evolving in a day and then take it times 175 days. I mean, that's our enterprise. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's huge. And so, anyway, I'll stop.
Potentially, another consideration is what this person's going to be asked to do in the next few years relative to other jobs. With the referendum, with the building needs, it seems like it's going to be a bigger job potentially than other school districts. So I think that's something to consider in what we're actually asking them to do.
Or a focus on some different things that you
Yeah.
may have in other districts.
Well, I would be in favor of the 225 figure with the built-in incentives, not there the first year. Yeah, so I would be on board with that.
And then flexibility with benefits to see where they would put money? Other people?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yep, I'm good.
No, you're right about the maximum flexibility. Everyone has different life goals and changes and issues that they need to deal with, and giving them the ability to move some things around to make it fit for them. That doesn't add anything to us, that's fine, so.
And what we can do is when Ken's here next week, we can ask him, is that a reasonable type of package to put out there? And we can hear what he has to say. Doesn't mean we'll change our mind. Okay, I just want to say that up front. but you'd want his
Yeah, he'll have a current pulse on,
yeah. Yeah.
And
But I
Bob,
think we're in the ballpark.
Yeah, this is a
We're
good-
really,
we have
I
a
think
pulse
we're
here.
solid. And the person's gonna be new, and they have to understand too, there's a little give and take here. That's the way I always felt. And I always felt like I'll come in there and I'll do my best, and if it meets their mark, then I can sit down in round 2 of negotiations and decide, you know, is it worth it for me to stay and work and continue that whole deal, so. All right,
Kelsey.
I'm sorry.
Kelsey, are you good with this? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I just
thought
saw
I
your-
saw, I saw you never.
I was taking notes and I didn't.
I saw 2 heads go that way, and then I was kind of going around, so I thought I had it, but thank you.
hey, Jim, can I add in just a little fun for our new board members? And they're gonna have 3 new board members that they gotta get up to speed.
Yeah, that's not my job.
Mine
You know, they're
either.
listening to this, and you really don't want to scare them off before you
Don't
even
scare
get
'em.
started, so.
Yeah. We may have
Good
to
news
cut
is we've
Dean
got
off.
Hey,
very
they've
good
waded in this
board
far.
members
What's that
joining.
phrase, in for a penny, in for a pound, or?
They're going to come in with board members ready to go
Ready to roll?
and as,
Yep.
working as a team. Yeah, enthusiastic and positive and ready to help the district do better things.
And remember, one of your roles is to help get the new folks up to speed.
I understand. I understand that very clearly. The last thing that we had for this evening was communication plans, so I'm going to turn the floor over to Barb and, nope, you take it. That way I won't say anything.
I'll put it right between us. So board members who were here last time, you remember that the communication plan had 2 big goals. The first was driving community engagement to create the superintendent profile that you needed to identify the kind of superintendent you were looking for. The second goal was around awareness, information sharing, so that people knew what was going on, how they could participate, and where to get more information. So this year, the goal is the latter, the same, know what's going on, how they can participate, and where to find more information. So we use every tool available to us. Again, I think I said last time, you do multiple tools, multiple ways, multiple times. And that would be the approach that we would use this year. Again, with the goal, the end goal of giving you what you need to hire your next superintendent. Participation in and of itself will not help you. Participation that provides information you can use will help you. So that's the goal, and I would propose that we move ahead with those same audiences, same goals this year.
Sounds good.
Good. I don't have any issues with that.
What do you mean by same audience, same goals, same?
So we identified target audiences last year. Parents, guardians of enrolled students, employees, students themselves, district residents, and business and civic leaders. So we would again reach out to those same audiences, and the goal would remain the same as the second goal we had this year. Last year we would carry it forward, which is people would be informed about the search, they would know how they can participate, and they would know where to find more information. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right.
Other questions around that? Otherwise, Barb will use that as her framework to move forward. And obviously, she'll work with the search firm to put together materials for the candidate recruitment, and we'll get going on that after we meet with school exec next Tuesday night. All right. That's what we had for you this evening. Is there anything else with the search? Not other topics, but just the search tonight that need to be covered? Otherwise, we'll take this information. The 3 of us are meeting tomorrow. We'll pull it all together. I'll give Ken Dragseth a call in the morning and let him know that we want to sit down and negotiate a contract for the pieces that we want help from them. Probably the 3 of us will meet with him in advance of Tuesday night, and then we'll make sure that he's here Tuesday night, and we'll walk through a very similar agenda. Only we'll give him as much materials in advance so that they can be prepared to say, yeah, that'll work, or here's a suggestion we have, or something like that, so that when we leave next Tuesday night, they're ready and the 3 of us are ready to really get going, and then we can get that position posted. I'm sure they can post it pretty quickly. And we'll we'll listen to him as far as their outreach goes, because my outreach is basically here in Minnesota. I do have some connections, because I did belong to a Midwest superintendents group. I can reach out to some of those individuals and do that too, but we'll get going. And put the pedal to the metal.
So I'm hearing hopefully mid to late December, but hopefully before Christmas, New Year's, so that.
I want
as
it,
they're
I
with
want it
family.
posted by or before December 17th.
Wonderful,
Yep.
because then, so if somebody's thinking about it, to have some time over the holidays.
They
to
do.
go, do we want to do this?
Yeah, and then the real debate, I think, Dean, becomes when do we cut it off on the other end? So that we have enough time so that if someone didn't see it after December 17th to January 2nd or 3rd, there's still enough time there's a window there where they can get things assembled and pull it together. So that's a question that the search firm will know better than I would, so. I'm already wanting to push it up a week, and it's like, maybe not. Maybe it's got to stay, all the way through, what is it, January 25th or something like that for, getting materials in, and then we go from there too, so.
So I'm curious, that just made me think, what happens if the deadline has passed and the search firm comes across a really strong candidate? Would they still
They can always add them to the
ask?
mix.
Okay.
I plead guilty.
Well, sometimes we were
It does
just having
happen.
this conversation. Sometimes you don't know about something
Yeah.
until it's already passed, and then you're like, shoot, I wish I could have done that.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't want to miss out on somebody who
and
could be the next superintendent.
it's happened in other searches, where we
Okay.
might be, not in the process where you're on your second round of interviewing, but in that
Right,
first round of
but-
interviewing.
Yeah.
Even happened to us with the finance and operations deal. We had people on our radar screen, people that applied, and so we started in with the group that we had, and I really wish schools would take on that model more. You interview people as they surface and come in, which is more of a private sector model, but we haven't gotten there because, like, for this position, it's so public, you just can't operate that way. When Apogee hires a new CEO, when Russ Huffer steps down, I mean, they can go about their business in any kind of timeline that they want to, but we can't. We've got to get our public engaged because they are our stakeholder. It's just a different process. So, but the search firms will do that,
Okay.
and I know this one will.
Jim, could you remind me just real quickly, when you think Burnsville would post, and B, their size?
When I looked at their website the other day, their superintendent resigned effective June, but she made the announcement in October. And I looked at then I went and looked at their November meeting schedules. And it said in there that they are going to be interviewing search firms in December, and they would post the position sometime, they would select the firm and post it in January. So if we get ours posted, we'll be about 3-4 weeks ahead of them. And they're a district, I think, of around 9,000, maybe 8,000 students. One high school, large high school. So, but their demographics aren't too dissimilar to ours. So from that's another reason why I was glad that Rosemont Apple Valley settled. Even though their demographics are similar, they're not quite as similar to us, but their size is the same, and so the complexity and the challenges and the opportunities would be very similar there. So it's nice that one's off the board. But Burnsville's job will be attractive to people, so we want to stay out in front of them.
Thank you.
Good point.
I'll turn it back to you.
One other comment. I was wondering, can we make sure to intentionally include Tanya and Kelsey and everything going forward on the search process? Like even get
You got
them
did you get the
district
email from?
emails,
Yeah, they got the email. They
Yeah,
say the
addresses,
same email you
got-
did.
in meeting invites? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yes, they're getting everything.
Great.
Thank you.
And Jackie has her technology, and Tanya and Kelsey will get theirs. Theirs is set, ready to go. So,
Yeah, and we agreed a month ago on the processes of including the member elects. So that's,
So they're
that's
getting
not,
information.
we've
Great.
done that all the time.
Great.
all right, so it's back to you.
Any other questions pertaining to this topic? Okay, with that, I make a motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.